driver off the deck for Corey Connors.
Here's driver off the deck for Victor Hovland.
So the driver off the deck. I know you would try this, right?
Oh my, what a shot.
Just to be able to hit it off the deck and get that thing down and fly it in running.
You have to put your foot on the gas. You pull out the driver off the deck and you put it on the green all the way up the hill.
Welcome back to another episode of Off the Deck. I am your host, Josh Decker. Really excited today to be joined by Mark Rivard of Charcoal Golf, who also has some really exciting news that launched today on their website. Mark, before we dive into all the things off the deck, what went live today on Charcoal Golf's website?
I decided to go ahead and paint my second hole down at Sweetens Cove Golf Club, King. Yeah, so I went down to Sweetens in June and was invited down there for the Walton Cup with the Gimme Golf guys. Love the golf course. I mean, fell in love with the place, and I'd been doing a lot of the King and Collins type courses with Landman, Sweetens, all that stuff. And to go down there and meet Matt and you know, have an experience playing the course and all that, we played King, and I was just like, well, this is obvious. This is the signature hole. This thing needs to be painted. So we have number 9 on the website currently, but we thought, you know, going into the holidays, let's knock out King. Let's put a second Sweetens Cove hole up there.
I love that. And King is so unique. For those that haven't been to Sweetens Cove, it is, as Matt Adamski says, the largest green you will ever miss. And that back pin can be incredibly challenging. So your artwork is very, very unique. The mediums you use blow my mind. How did you even venture into this world? And if you can, give us some backstory on what those mediums are, because for those that haven't seen Mark's artwork, it is combination of Sharpie and charcoal and pencil, and there's more that you're probably using that I don't even know of. But tell us about that process and what that's like, and just what your artwork visually, because this is obviously a podcast, what it looks like.
So I kind of like to I call my style urban contemporary. So it's contemporary art for sure. It's got some abstract elements, but it's also it's got kind of this urban feel to it, a little bit of this urban flair, if you will, where you know, my background is in skateboarding, and through kind of, I got into art through the skateboard art world, designing skateboards and things like that. And so I kind of have this history of sort of these urban elements, you know, street art and things like that. So that kind of, you can see that thread, that sort of DNA throughout all of my paintings, even into the golf world now, which is what I think is making our artwork so unique as we kind of enter into the space of golf from an art perspective, is that it has a grittier vibe to it. So it's an abstract piece, but it's also very identifiable. Like, you look at one of the paintings and you know immediately that's Sweetens Cove number 9, or this behind me here is you know, you can tell right off the bat, that's anybody that's played Landman number 17 knows that hole, and you can see it. So there's these visual identities that are really clear and obvious, but also, you know, you take some artistic liberty to make something kind of more abstract. So whenever someone asks, like, what's your style of art, I generally try to say urban contemporary. You know, it's an elevated fine art, but it's also got that kind of street art, gritty nature to it. And bringing that into the golf world really has been interesting, to say the least. I mean, just, it's making a splash and just kind of becoming something very different than we're traditionally seen in the golf space. So, the mediums are, I started my career off illustrating with Sharpies, and, you know, and eventually I ended up with an endorsement deal with Sharpie. I was the face of Sharpie markers for a while, and, you know,
very cool.
Sharpie almost exclusively. Yeah. So my career is, I got well known in the art world for working with Sharpie markers, and I still use an ultrafine black Sharpie to this day. That's kind of that's my pencil. That's what I start everything with, is just a simple illustration with the black ultrafine Sharpie. But the charcoal paintings, they have a million different things from a medium standpoint. I mean, I start with basically just illustrating the layout of a golf hole from a topographical top-down view, and then it goes into like putting together watercolor, things like that. My dog's got a squeaky toy over there. I can hear it. Great. She found her squeaky toy at a perfect time. Anyway, yeah, so you got the topographical kind of sketch down view, but then I'm big on using a lot of different layers, you know, a lot of different mediums in terms of like watercolor. There's oils, there's Sharpie, there's charcoal. Obviously, charcoal kind of became the name brand for us. Right down to, like, the coolest thing with Sweetens, once I started investigating Sweetens, I mean, Sweetens number 9, I diluted all of my watercolor with bourbon, with whiskey, with Tennessee whiskey. So, you know, little Easter eggs that you can kind of hide in the paintings as well. So I like doing that. You know, I tend to find myself using coffee as a pigment a lot of times, or, you know, whatever I'm drinking at the moment. that'll
And are
end
you
up on.
using stock imagery, or are you sending a drone up to get the shot of the course that you want to use for the painting? Or what are you typically using as a reference point for? I know it's not to scale necessarily, but I would imagine there is some of that of where tee boxes are and how large the painting is. How are you getting that information?
Yeah, mostly it started off mostly just Google Earth and using anything I could find on YouTube, like flyover videos, scouring social media, looking at the course's social media and just kind of trying to find it. Different images of that hole, piecing together, the undulations, the scope of the hole, all of that. Right down to 18 Birdies app is fantastic. I mean, that's basically just pulling from Google Earth. So you go through a preview of a golf course on 18 Birdies and you can zoom in and zoom out and, you can kind of cherry pick your yardages and things like that from there. So a lot of times it started just really basically just trying to kind of piece together via whatever I could find online what that hole is going to look like. And they're certainly not to scale. I take some artistic license in terms of being able to fit something on a piece of paper, for example, but they're pretty close. I try to get the accuracy of the hole. You want it to be identifiable. You definitely want the viewer to know this is, Bethpage 18, for example, very identifiable golf hole. So you need the viewer to be able to understand what they're looking at, but also then make it kind of abstract. So Google Earth has been, I'm a nerd for maps. I could stare at a map all day, and I found that really fun to zooming in and out and getting kind of the scale of the landscapes and things like that. So, but right down to now, in the dream world, you go and you visit the golf course, you play the hole, you make notes. I've been fortunate now to play a lot of these courses and go and actually see it. Really it sounds very Bob Rossi, but touch the grass. Sitting there on a tee box looking at the hole before you paint it and understanding how that color reacts. All those little elements is pretty cool. So.
Have you done one on site yet? Like painted, set up an easel and had your materials there and painted on site? Have you done that anywhere yet?
Not necessarily. No, I have. I've gone out to Golden Valley, the club at Golden Valley here in Minnesota. It's a Tillinghast course, and one of our partners is a member there. Pat Jacobson's a member there at Golden Valley. So I've been lucky enough to be able to go out there with the painting and sit with the easel outside and kind of get a sense. But I haven't done the full setup yet.
Okay.
I did intend to do it at Prairie Dunes when we were down there for our research and development trip in July. But it was 110 degrees out and my paints were literally melting. So it was tough. It was tough.
Not ideal.
Yeah. So we went down to Prairie Dunes and I was going to try to actually sit out there and paint. We were up on the tee box on 6 during golden hour and I was all set up and ready to roll. And it was just you have oil sticks and stuff and they were literally melting in the bag. And I was just like, this is brutal. This is going to be, I'm going to ruin this painting if I even try out right now. The paper was folding and it was bad. It was too hot, but, I would love it, man. I mean, that's kind of the dream, is to set up like a residency. If you get a partnership with a club, you can go down there, maybe you spend a week working on 3 paintings or something and you sit and really play the course, walk the hole, really get your bearings and figure out how it plays, what it, how it's going to react on the paper and see it, see those colors and kind of get that going. So.
That's very, very cool. So how long has charcoal golf been around? What took this from a hobby to, hey, yeah, you know what? I want to do this and I want to produce these, print these from the original and then sell them.
We incorporated Charcoal Golf LLC in March of this year, so 2025. And I painted the first hole. The first golf hole I painted was Edinburgh number 17, and it was a very quick, simple illustration. It was part of a project I did called the Postal Express Project. Really, really basic. This was like a 30-minute, just very quick outline watercolor of Edinburgh number 17. And the response from that was just amazing. So we started, I started getting all these requests. Landman was kind of the first one that really kind of took hold. A lot of people were requesting Landman, and I was, selling these very cheap, really quick 30-minute sketches, basically. Just simple sketches, very small. And then from there, we just kind of, we're like, this is interesting. There is a lot of interest in this golf art for sure. And I enjoy painting it. It's something I did as a hobby. I mean, I'm a golf freak. So, finding kind of that interest level in golf was kind of cool. And so we started then looking at it as potentially a business, and we kind of had the right things in place. Pat Jacobson, one of our partners, he's on the events team with the Golfers Journal. He's out there visiting these golf courses all over the country, and he was making these connections and telling, club pros about this artwork. and they were all very interested, and then Russ Olson, our other partner on Charcoal Golf, he runs a major print shop here in the Twin Cities, and he has the capability to print like unbelievable level, and we can print on demand. And we were kind of like, we have no inventory, no overhead. We could basically just put these up on a website and sell print on demand, with no real overhead. And so it just made a lot of sense. I mean, from a business perspective, the three of us came together. We all kind of had a skill set that really complemented, and we started that in March of 2025. Pretty new.
That's outstanding. That's very cool. Yeah, asset light, no overhead. Like, sounds like a dream scenario for a business. So you mentioned you're a golf freak. When did you get introduced to the game? What was that like?
Well, I wasn't always a golf freak. I hated it as a kid. I was not a golfer when I was young. I kind of grew up near Edinburgh, USA, in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. It's a really nice course. Great track. It's a muni technically, but it's in, Brooklyn Park is certainly not the nicest area. It's kind of this weird anomaly of this beautiful golf course in the middle of kind of a just north of Minneapolis suburban neighborhood. And I did not like golf as a kid. I mean, both my parents played. My mom was on the women's golf league at Edinburgh, and she would drag me out to the course all the time. And I'd go kicking and screaming. I didn't want to be doing that. I wanted to be downtown skating and, getting into trouble and just kind of doing the little punk thing that I was involved in there. And so I hated it at first. And then I lived in Colorado in my 20s. I lived my entire 20s. I did 9 years in Breckenridge, Colorado. And I just did the ski bum thing. I was skiing and living the life out there. Breckenridge Golf Club, I had some friends that worked there, and we would start kind of sneaking out on the course. You'd go out there at like 6 p.m. or whatever, and you'd go play a couple holes and borrow a cart. And, we were kind of sneaking around playing a little bit, and just no idea what we were doing. No concept of how nice that golf course is either. Just the reality of where we were playing was pretty crazy. And I ended up moving home in 2009. I moved back to Minneapolis, and kind of my friends started playing a little bit here and there. And before I knew it, we were golfing once a week, and we were buying clubs. And, next thing I know, I'm in Golf Galaxy buying a golf bag. And I was like, what have I turned into? And now I love it. I'm so hooked. It's, basically the last 15 years has been as much golf as I can play.
So, and I love that. It's fascinating to hear the different journeys that people have to get to where they are with the game. Like, you hated it as a child, and then we've had some people who've fallen out of love with the game because they played it so much as they were younger, and then had to kind of have a restructuring of their relationship with golf would be a way to put it. But golf is typically traditional and like refined, for lack of a better word, stuffy. And I feel like charcoal golf pushes the limits on that. Do you think charcoal golf challenges those limits, complements those limits? Where do you think charcoal golf fits in? Because it's certainly something that I would call edgy if I'm describing the artwork. And it's tremendous stuff. I'm embarrassed I don't have any pieces yet. I need to go ahead and get those on my Christmas list. But yeah, how do you think charcoal golf fits into that?
Yeah, I love that observation. I appreciate that. To be honest, I'm big on like the narrative that, like a lot of what I do is in education. I work with a lot of kids. I own a skateboard business as well. And I bring skateboards into schools, and I teach kids how to, through my art career and through my story and through the pop culture aspect of skateboarding, we do art classes. But those eventually turn into business classes, and it's about marketing, and it's about self-confidence and these types of things. And I have always, that's part of what turned me off about golf was, that stuffy nature, that country club vibe. I did not want to be a part of that. I had no interest in that. I wasn't the kind of kid that learned in a very traditional way, even in school. I barely graduated high school, but I certainly wasn't dumb. You know what I mean? Like, I just was never told that there are other opportunities and there's other pathways. And I kind of created my own pathway in a sense. Like, now I work in education, and it's kind of almost a little bit, the irony is incredible. Like, I couldn't stand school, and now I'm speaking at them. And to me, I tell that to kids all the time. And I try to bring that same energy into the golf world as well. You just because something has been done this way for years and years and years doesn't mean there's not another route, and there's a different way to approach it, and there's a different way to appreciate that. So, I've kind of always felt like that. Like, you can do these remarkable things in these spaces that you're maybe not invited into or allowed into, but you can find your own avenue towards that world. And I think that is one of the things I think golf struggles with, is that inclusivity, that kind of, a bit of a gatekeeping vibe, if you will. in certain areas. And I understand it. I think a lot of those, when you're a member at a club and things like that, that's part of the allure, is having that private space, that exclusivity type thing. I get that. But being able to open the door to anybody else is an incredible gift if you can find a way to do that. And I think through my artwork, I've been able to kind of do that through a lot of avenues. Golf being kind of the furthest one, but like in education, I can go into a school in inner city Chicago or something and speak to those kids and tell them, you have the opportunity through your own means and through your own ambitions and your own ideas to kind of find any lane you want to be in. You can do that. And I think that shows in the artwork. You think with charcoal, especially, the conversations we're having today with some of the clubs that we're talking to is kind of like, I don't belong in these places. I step foot on some of these golf courses and I'm just like, who did we fool? How did we get here? Like, this is, but then you got to kind of remind yourself, you're here because you did something, and you're here because they invited you, and you're here because you're bringing something of value, and stand on that confidence a little bit. And so it's been really, really cool to kind of get into golf from that perspective. But then now looking at like our model, for example, with charcoal, we have this new concept. Initially, we just thought this is pretty simple. Plug and play. We're just going to sell prints. I'll paint golf holes. We'll sell prints. Easy. And then we started thinking about it, and I was like, we could do something really special with this. Like, what if we were able to use the commission? When we pay a club a commission for a print sale, that little commission that we get, a little check that we might pay to a private country club, that's not moving the needle for these guys. But instead of, giving them that commission, which they probably don't need, I mean, nobody says no to money, but what if we were able to use that commission check and put that towards youth on course or first tee? What if we're able to kind of use the artwork and the story of charcoal golf to kind of give back to the students in the local area communities that can use that in a better way? The golf world doesn't need anything from me, I mean, whatever country club, you name it, whatever country club in America, they don't need anything from me. I can't provide much to that country club in terms of a value. Art is cool. Everybody appreciates that. But if we're able to use the artwork and leverage kind of their following and their membership to do something good for that community, that's incredible. So that's kind of one of the directions we really want to start pushing charcoal. And it's something I feel good about. When I sit down to paint now, and I know that in a way we're going to find some way to give this back to that local community, youth on course, first tee, whatever the case may be. This is a special route. It's really cool.
That's tremendous. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that you're doing that. Tell me a little bit about the skateboards and you taking those into schools. So am I envisioning correctly that you have 30 skateboards thrown over your shoulder and are walking in with paintbrushes and paint to talk to kids and then decorate the skateboards? Am I envisioning that correctly?
Yeah, pretty much. Yep. That's pretty much it. Yeah, I started a business called Do Rad Things. After when I was involved with Sharpie from like 2011 to 2012, I was the face of Sharpie markers. They made a documentary about my career, and all of that was because of, ski injuries and blowing out my knees and, going through surgeries and recovery times and things like that. And I was illustrating skateboards with Sharpies. And with Sharpie, they kind of gave me my 15 minutes, if you will. For a good chunk there, I was doing a lot of media and press, and I got a lot of attention because of that campaign. So that was pretty cool. And I started being invited into schools just as a speaker. I would go and talk to kids and tell my story. And I had an interesting story from an education perspective, because, like I said, I wasn't a great student. I barely graduated high school. But I was well spoken, and I could, I certainly, I wasn't educated traditionally, but I was certainly not a dumb kid. And yeah. I was able to communicate that. And the kids, through skateboarding and through the notoriety of Sharpie, I had pop culture and youth culture, and I had, a little bit of that D-list celebrity, value that I was bringing into a school. So I captured the attention. And if you can hold the attention of a kid, for more than 5 seconds, you're kind of winning. And right. Schools loved it. And they were like, you've got something here. And I felt really good about what I was doing. One of the things in art, when you're painting or any type of art for that matter, I think, if you're a writer or anything, you're spending so much of your life in your own head. And it is inherently a selfish endeavor, to make art. It's a selfish thing. To find a way for that to give back, in a sense, and I kept feeling good about going into these schools. So the more I got invited into these schools, the better I felt about what I was doing with my career. And then I realized that I had a curriculum. I was using my story. I owned a skateboard company at this point. I'd already started a skateboard company, so I had access to a lot of skateboards, and I had the support of Sharpie. I mean, at one point, Sharpie said, "How do you continue to do this? We love that you're going into these schools." And when I was on contract with them, I had a PR person. I, did some press, media training, things like that. I was like, I want to keep doing this. They kept saying, at one point they pitched a reality television show to me called The Skateboard Whisperer, which I said no to. Thank God. That would have been a nightmare. I mean, that can ruin your life.
The Skateboard Whisperer.
Yeah.
What a name.
Yeah. Yeah, I was pitched the reality TV show at one point, and I said no, and I'm so glad I did. In hindsight, 2020. I mean, I was like, oh man. But I said, I love this education world. This feels good. This is great. And Sharpie said, we like that as well. This is good PR. It's obviously positive press for the brand. We want you to keep doing as much of that as possible. How do we help support it? And I was meeting these teachers, and my mind always kind of goes to, how do I give back in some sort of way? Like I was saying, there's this selfish endeavor of art, but then beyond that, when it's done, how do we maximize the value of that artwork? And I was like, I meet all these art teachers, and I'm working in public schools, and I'm passionate about that. Even like this kind of translates to the country club level as well. The country club versus muni type thing. It's great to go work at a country club and get a commission or a project with one of those country clubs, but then being able to give that back somehow to kind of the muni or the public school, if you will, was incredible. And I said, I just need help with these teachers. They have no budgets. And Sharpie said, I was like, every school I visit, I want to make sure they are so loaded with Sharpies and art supplies that, that teacher is good for the next few years, And they said, we got you. And at one point I was in my studio, and I get a phone call. I go down to the delivery driver was there, and he's like, you got to come sign for this. And we're pulling up to the loading dock. And I was like, what do you mean? The loading dock? What are you talking about? And I go down to the loading dock of my building where my studio was at the time. The semi truck backs up. They unloaded 12 pallets of Sharpies. I had 3/4 of Sharpies delivered. Yeah. And I had a tiny little 700 square foot art studio. And I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, so I ended up getting a couple storage units, and basically over the course, it took about 8 years, but I gave away 750,000 Sharpies to kids in schools. And, I've visited thousands of schools now. I've spoke at thousands of schools all over the world. Yeah. It's that kind of give back in a way, like being able to kind of find that avenue from the selfish endeavor of art and that expression, and, using my voice and the platform I was given because of Sharpie, to kind of find a way to push that out. And I realized, I have, that left brain, right brain thing is always clicking. I'm always juggling between the two. Some days I need to sit down and I need to be creative and introspective, and other days I've got to go out and do some media and be the business person and actually operate a business. And I built a brand around that. It's called the Do Rad Things. And it's all about bringing skateboards into schools and bringing art supplies into schools. And I use my story and my platform to kind of go and I speak to these kids. And now I write art education curriculum. So I actually build curriculum, experiential learning platforms for schools. And I help teachers all over the world develop really cool initiatives that their kids are going to get engaged in. And we get kids into the community beyond the art. I teach them how to draw on skateboards. That's the hook. But then we go out and I learn with those kids, like, how do we use your social media? What can we do to exhibit this? Maybe we go talk to the local coffee shop, get your artwork up somewhere. How much is it worth? I talk about the value all the time. I tell kids, my first skateboard sold for $100. And so, we talk about the money, which is something I don't think a lot of those kids want to do, or a lot of teachers kind of, especially in the art world, you're not supposed to talk about it, which I think is baloney. I have no problem talking about the value of a painting or how much this is worth or why my time costs this much and yada, yada, and I think when we can give those answers to kids, all of a sudden they start connecting the dots, and, it's really powerful.
It's interesting to me that you describe art as selfish, because I think of me taking 4, unfortunately, sometimes 5 hours to go play golf. Yeah. And that's a hobby, right? Yep. So I go play golf, I go chase the ball around, but then there's nothing that anyone else has the opportunity to enjoy unless I'm playing with somebody and I make an ace or they make an ace or hit a great shot. There's high fives and enjoying that. But that ends as soon as that round is over, unless there's something, you win a tournament or something.
Sure.
But what you're creating and what you're putting on paper is something that people are able to enjoy and put on their walls, put in their homes, and appreciate for a very long time. So I see where you're coming from in saying that it's selfish, but at the same time, I'm like, no, it's not. If anything, it's selfless because you're creating something like, and of course you've got Sweetens Cove and Landman, two places that I cherish, love dearly, both of those golf courses. And so seeing that image, and if I walk into my living room or if I walk into my downstairs, brings back great memories. My wife and I have a funny little kind of back and forth that we get rid of things in our home if they don't bring us joy. And so I keep Tervis tumblers from all these golf courses I've played because I open the cabinet and I see that logo and it reminds me of that time. It reminds me of playing Sea Island. It reminds me of playing Kapalua.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm not going to push back and be like, no, you're wrong. But I think I think you're cutting yourself short to say that art is selfish.
Yeah.
Curious what you think about that.
I mean, that's a great observation. I think because it's true. You do, and that's the hope, is that the piece of artwork then becomes something that somebody else is going to have an experience with. Like I feel like a painting's failed if the viewer doesn't look at it, and of course it's subjective. Not everybody likes the artwork. Not everybody, my brand of art is not everyone's brand of art. But if somebody can look at something and have an experience, I think we do sort of undercut the value of a visual artwork. Let's use a painting as an example. I find myself like in my home, I love to collect art. I try not to hang a lot of my own artwork in my home because I don't want to sit and stare at the me show all day. So I love having other artists that I'm fans of. And I find that I spend more time looking at a painting on my wall than I do my TV. I really have an interaction with this one visual image that doesn't change, but sits there for years and years and years at a time. And I can stare at that and have something new or have some sort of emotional attachment or reaction to that, which is pretty cool. I mean, it is powerful. And I think when I say it's a selfish endeavor, it's not selfish in the wrong way. I guess that sounds, 'cause I get what your pushback is, because it sounds like you're mad at it. Like you don't want to, like you feel guilty about doing it. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. I just mean it is, you're creating something, especially golf, which is a space that just doesn't need us. It doesn't, we're not changing the world as golfers. You know what I mean? Like, and so I always have that kind of like internal struggle of is what I'm doing. I know it's adding a value and I know people are appreciating this, but I always want to try to find more, I guess, and when it comes to like, can we take a brand and make that a partnership with a kickback to kids, like how do we maximize what that is? And that to me, it makes it feel worth it. But the little wins, that you might not see every single day is when somebody gets a piece of artwork and puts it on their wall and they think about it or they have a memory of that experience. That's a micro win, but it's a huge win because it really is pretty important. It's a cool thing. And a world without art would be, this will get really philosophical, but like, that I don't want to live in that world. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, like over my shoulder is the painting Lee Wawrinski. I don't know if you have any of his stuff, but
yeah.
He does tons of work with the tour, and that's the PGA Championship that my wife and I went to at Quail Hollow.
Awesome.
So that's the kind of thing that I like. It takes me back to that place, and that's what I feel like your painting of number 9 at Sweetens, your work that you've done at Landman. I have incredible memories of number 17 at Landman. If you haven't been to Landman, it is a drivable par 4, and you will make a 7 or an 8. But it is such a great golf hole, and that green is massive, and awesome. It brings back those memories or ignites that thought of, oh yeah, remember when the wind was blowing 20 miles an hour into our face, and we had to hit driver and it went nowhere. So what is next for Charcoal Golf? Are you wanting to increase your inventory and just get more holes on your website? What does the future look like?
Yeah, we did. We had a really amazing partnership with Prairie Dunes Country Club down in Hutchinson and Hutchinson, Kansas. We did the Maxwell collection. So it was the Perry Maxwell 1937. The Carey family opened Prairie Dunes Country Club. They hired Perry Maxwell to do the course. He did a 9-hole course in 1937. In 1957, his son Press Maxwell added another 9, making it the full 18. But the original 9 by Perry Maxwell from 1937 is kind of it's pretty iconic, and it was one of his earlier courses. And obviously Perry Maxwell went on to do amazing things. And they commissioned me to paint the original 9 holes as they play today. So it's 1, 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 17, 18. And we painted all 9, and we're releasing those on our website called the Maxwell Collection. So you can go and buy an individual print or you can buy the entire collection. and we'll be doing by the time this comes out, we'll have done the actual opening night. Prairie Dunes really, they did it right. I mean, they came in as a partner and said, we're invested, we're partnering, we're going to buy the original paintings. They live on the walls. When you walk into Prairie Dunes Country Club, the first entrance, you're going to see all 9 of my paintings there, all of the originals. And they invited us down to do that course tour. We did a research and development trip, went down there and filmed a bunch of content stuff. I walked all 9 of those holes and spent 3 days basically just immersed in all things Prairie Dunes, got into their archives and talked with the super there and did, a guy named Bill Southern, one of their oldest members. He's been playing there since 1963. He and I spent an entire afternoon just walking the Perry Maxwell holes. And he told me stories about the hole, like how it plays, where his favorite pin locations are, all of that stuff. I mean, really, really really, I call it, I wrote an artist statement called, a handshake with Mr. Maxwell. Like it's a collaboration. Like I collaborated in a strange way with Perry Maxwell, and these are his holes. These are his creations. I'm just kind of doing my own artistic vision of it. And that's pretty cool. That's that project is massive. I mean, to do a project of that scale, all the way up to opening night reception, we're going to have, we'll go down there. We'll have all the paintings will be on display. They're going to be all around the green. We haven't really decided exactly where yet, but we're thinking like on the 18th green or the 10 tee box there. So outdoors opening night exhibition where we unveil all 9 original paintings. And those will of course be up on the website. And for us, I think it's just, we don't want to just paint to paint, like I've kind of always said, like, we want to have really strategic partnerships with the courses that we are working with that are on our website and things like that. Not everyone is interested in our distribution model and things, but when we can create a strong partnership like we've done with Prairie Dunes, or Landman has been fantastic about, really leaning into the idea that we're painting that course and we're putting prints up of their course, it's still theirs. And so, for us, it's just building that library. We need to kind of continue to build partnerships, create that library, but really strategic. We want to work with courses that want to work with us, and that people are fans of. You go play Landman or you go play Prairie Dunes. That's an experience. People have a real, true emotional connection to that place, and that's a really, you go out and you see your dad hit a hole in one somewhere. You're going to remember that golf course for the rest of your life, and so you want to tap into that. And that's really what we want to do. We want to build a bigger library. I think for charcoal long term, we want to have, I'm never going to stop painting these things. I mean, there's 38,864 golf courses in the world.
Who's counting?
Yeah. I got plenty of material, it's, we're just going to continue to go and build and, be strategic about what we're painting and why we're doing it. But continue to kind of work with these partnerships, and if we can find ways to give that back to youth on course or first tee or anything like that, that's the goal. Let's just keep building these things up. We just signed a really, really great partnership with Tiari Links in New Zealand. So yeah, we'll be doing, I'm going to start with painting number 17 on the South Course, which is a Coor and Crenshaw. So that's amazing. We're getting some international love there, and I can't talk about it quite yet. It'll be out soon, but I just did a painting for a course in Scotland. So we're building an inventory, building a library. And I think long-term, I don't necessarily sell all the originals, but it would be so cool to have an exhibition someday, to see them all on the wall together and, create an actual art exhibition, a book. It eventually, I think you gotta be, you gotta have 100 holes before you even consider a book, but that'd be a dream. That's kind of one of those goals for me.
Really appreciate that you view it as a partnership and not just getting access to a golf course and coming and painting a signature hole. It seems much more of a collaborative effort as opposed to you just laying your eyes on Google Earth and painting something and trying to sell it.
Yeah.
And I'm ignorant to this, but what do golf courses own the licensing to the imagery of their golf? Does that make sense? Do they own how does that work?
It's a great question, because I had to think about that one quite a bit. In fact, no, not necessarily. There's kind of a fine line. I could technically go and paint any course I want. If you can find it on Google Earth and you can render it in my own style, I have, there's no legal grounds for a course to say you can't do that. We can't put their logo on it, or, there's a lot of gray area there, but you don't own the rights to what the earth looks like. So if you can go on Google Earth and paint, you could go paint anything you want. Like anybody can make a piece of artwork of Augusta National and sell it. use Augusta National's logo, and you can't claim that you're in partnership with them, but you could do that. Now, we don't want to. I don't think that's a great business practice for us. We've said from the jump, I was like, we're not creating a product, we're creating a story. We're creating an experience, we're creating an emotional connection here. And I don't want to get into the business of selling souvenirs per se. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
This is an elevated product. It's something where we want the club to really be in lockstep with us. We want them to be proud of what we've put out there. And it was really cool. I got to give Prairie Dunes a ton of credit on this. I painted the 10th hole there as a commission for one of their members, posted it on my social media, and Prairie Dunes reached out. They actually DM'd me, and they're like, this is awesome. Who are you? And are you selling this? What's going on here? A lot of these clubs, they're very protective of their image, of their, a lot of them, they want nothing to do with the public ever seeing anything, and I understand that, that's kind of part of their product. And so Prairie Dunes reached out and they said, well, what's going on here? First of all, like, we love it, but what is this? And I was like, whoa, I didn't sell this. Your member bought the original. Hey, there's one of one here. I'm just sharing it. And I said, but what do you guys think? Do you like it? Like, maybe we could do something. And I got to give Carissa Jackson down there, Billy Bolin, and Thomas Barksdale. He said, well, we're kind of curious about this. Let's talk about something. So I was like, let me paint you something. I painted 12 and 13. It's the little corner there, Briar Patch and Sumac. And we sent some prints down to them. And I said, this is what we can do. We'd love to create a partnership with you guys. And they were like, yeah, all right, we're kind of curious. Let's do that. And so basically we said, well, this is at no cost to you. We'll just do this, and we're going to give you a commission check on all of the prints that we sell. All we ask in return is that you help us market and promote it, and that you verbally say we're partners. And they said, well, let's one up it. We want you to come down and paint all 9 of the Perry Maxwell holes. And well, they leaned all the way in. And really, I mean, I think they hit a home run. I think they saw the value in that, and they appreciated that we were coming back to them and saying, we're interested in a partnership. We're not interested in just sort of stealing your images and your likeness. But yeah, it's a long way to answer your question. Yes, you can go and paint anything you want. There's a lot of companies out there that'll go on Google Earth and strip the map of that course, throw an Illustrator layer over the top of that, and sell it for $20 on their website. And they throw the name of the club, the location, the year it was built, the architect, all of that. And they can do that legally. They can absolutely do that. You can buy 1 million different Augusta National pieces of artwork online from, any sort of Temu-esque Etsy store, whatever. And you can do it. We don't want to. We want to have a real, true relationship. I want somebody, when they have a piece of charcoal art on their wall, to know that they bought something that is really, really, truly ingrained in that club, that is, had a real relationship to the place. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes so much more sense, and it sounds like there's just the value of that relationship for charcoal golf and that golf course. It creates something that's long lasting and not just transactional.
Yeah,
and I think that's important.
Yep.
What if there was a course that you could have a partnership with that you don't right now? What would be your dream course to paint?
Man, well, New Zealand is looking pretty sweet. There's, doing some Google Earth research down there. I'm so excited to start with Tiaria. I mean, we really we're in a good position. It's been really pretty remarkable. We've been very fortunate to have some conversations with some of these clubs like Tiari Links, and I mean, it's a dream to see that place, to see it, looking at it online and just going, wow. I mean, pristine. I mean, absolutely beautiful. So, I'm really fascinated with New Zealand right now. I've been thinking a lot about those areas. The whole Monterey area, of course, Cyprus and those things, they paint beautifully. I think of the holes, the kind of courses that I'd like to paint are they generally have a relationship with the landscape that's less manufactured. I love the courses like a Landman, for example, where you really use the land. And they paint really well. There's a challenge to painting certain courses that are too manicured, that are too perfect. Yeah, I would say, Cyprus, obviously, the Monterey area, that would be beautiful. That'd be really, really fun to paint. Some of those desert courses, I think the colors are really interesting. It'd be kind of cool to kind of get into some of that. A lot of those courses in New Zealand are going to be really, really cool to kind of dive into. Honestly, like a lot of the UK, the Irelands, the Scotlands, they're harder because from a top-down perspective, it's green on green on green. And so you're really struggling to find something interesting. Not a lot of trees. There's, if you look at a topographical top down of the old course, for example, it's a lot of just green. And you don't see it from the top down. It's really hard to kind of illustrate the undulations and things like that. So that's a harder thing to paint. You know, I looked at some of the Scotland courses and I was just like, man, this is going to be tricky. How do you make it interesting? You got to tell a story through that painting. And that's harder to do when there isn't a landscape value. You know, you think of Cyprus on the point there. I mean, the rocks, the ocean, I mean, Pebbled 7, of course, you know, it's so iconic, but like, you have anything that's visually stunning is going to be more interesting to paint, in my opinion.
Yeah, so those rougher, less manicured, because like the first thing that popped in my head when you said that was like, oh, TPC Sawgrass would be horrible because it's just so perfect and doesn't have. I'm trying to. It's difficult to articulate, but yeah, the natural areas like Cypress and like we have out at Landman, those really create more character and probably give the painting much more life than just something that's a perfect green edge that goes along another perfect green edge.
Yeah, and it's cool. Like if you think of like the South Carolina, a lot of that whole zone down near Augusta there, Aiken, and you've got your old Barnwell Tree Farm, Ohoopee. A lot of those courses, amazing. They look so cool to paint. It'd be just incredible to dive into some of those. And then just down the road, you look at Augusta, for example, and it's just pure perfection. I mean, but I love that whole zone. When you think of those areas surrounding Aiken, the South Carolina, Charleston zones, like some of those courses, just the way the sand contrasts with the grass there and stuff, it's awesome. I mean, those are really high on the list to kind of dive into. A lot of those ones are pretty cool. So, you're fighting to find something interesting in every hole, and every golf hole is interesting inherently. It's especially if you're a golfer, when you're looking at it, you're seeing something different than the, you know, if you don't play golf and you look at one of these paintings, you're probably like, well, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
You know?
It can be a little confusing. I can see that.
Yeah, there's a certain education you have to appreciate that, you know?
Right.
But yeah, finding ways to make even the most mundane muni interesting is a challenge, and I like that. I like that challenge.
That's awesome. Well, I got a couple quick hitter questions, and then we'll get you out of here. You've been very gracious with your time, so thank you for that, Mark. What is the favorite course to you that you've played in 2025? A new course for you in 2025 that you played. What's your favorite?
Oh man, it's been a good year. Prairie Dunes. Prairie Dunes is special. You know, to have the relationship down there and the invite to come down and play, and then you know, the time I got to spend out there with Bill Southern and you know, really, you know, just the connection now to that club for me is pretty life changing. I mean, Prairie Dunes was special. Like playing it was absolutely special, and you know, it's interesting to paint something and then go and play it, and you know, have that. It's a different relationship I have with the course now, you know. It's hard to explain, you know. It's Prairie Dunes is top of the list for sure. Landman comes right in there second. Sweetens was great. You know, I got to play Landman and Sweetens for the first time this year. So those Rob Collins, King Collins courses, those are great. Dormer's fantastic. Meeting those guys was awesome. But I got to give the nod to Prairie Dunes there. That was special.
Okay. What's your favorite club in the bag right now?
Yeah, none of them.
We have not gotten that answer yet.
No, the great irony, I putted pretty good the other day. The great irony is, you know, I got into painting golf courses and now I play so little. Like I've played less golf this year than I have in probably the last 6 or 7 years because I've been so busy painting them. So yeah, that's the great irony of it. Right now, though, the putter felt really good the other day. I was pretty happy with that.
Okay. If you could put together a dream foursome, who would be in your dream foursome?
My nephews. I've got 3 nephews, and they are twin boys. They're 12 and 15. The 4 of us playing golf is the coolest thing on earth. When I can go out with Chase, Graham, and Carter, man, they're the best. They're part of Youth on Course, which I really appreciate that organization, giving my nephews a lot of access to go play golf and making it affordable for us. And when I can take my 3 nephews out golfing, I mean, that's the best time ever. And just watching them really get into the game and respect it and appreciate it. And you know, watching one of my nephews fix a divot in the green is like the coolest thing on earth. It's like, this is great. Yeah, playing with my nephews is the best.
I love that. Okay, this is a fun question to ask you just because of how many golf holes you've looked at. If you could compile or make a composite 3-hole routing, any 3 holes in the world, what would those 3 holes be?
That exist currently?
That exist, yeah.
Boy, it's got to be a par 3, a par 4, and a par 5. You gotta have a little mix of everything. I would say, I like number 6 at Edinburgh, USA. It's a drivable par 4. On a good day, you can get the driver there, and it's just got a lot going on. There's a lot happening there, and it's my home. That's home for me. So 6 par 4 at Edinburgh. Par 3s. I right now I've been staring at King quite a bit, and I loved it when I played that. That was really, really cool. Like the 2 pins on King and just plays so different. So I think King would be the par 4 or par 3 there, down at Sweetens. And then, boy, the next hole, par 5 too. And I don't know. I don't remember what hole it was, but it was Half Moon Bay in California. The finishing stretch there is right along the coastline, and I played it solo one day. I was out there for a trip, and I went down by myself and played Half Moon Bay, and it was the longest round ever. I wish I knew what hole that was. One of the finishing holes right on the end there. That was just, I don't know. It was a special experience. I was alone. I was hit like hour 5. The group in front of me was partying, having a blast, which was great because I just kind of took my time, and I just remember sitting there like, this is pretty cool. Yeah, that I wish I remembered now. Shoot. Anyway, Half Moon, one of those finishing holes.
No, those are 3 great holes. And then lastly, do you hit it off the deck? And if so, why or why not?
Absolutely not. No, man. I'm just happy to hit the ball, man. If I can get one square in the face off a tee, I'm thrilled. No, I've tried, sure, but no, that shot's not in my bag. I'm not that good yet, but it's pretty cool when you see it, man. If somebody can do it, it's like,
right.
Wow. Yeah.
I can't do it, but I've got some friends that can, and it's fun to watch. So
Yeah.
for listeners, if they want to find your artwork, tell them how to find Charcoal Golf.
Charcoalgolf.com is our website. We're constantly updating. The library's growing. We've got prints for sale there, and Charcoal Golf on Instagram is probably the best way. I manage that account. You can get straight to me on Charcoal Golf on Instagram. Yeah, hit us up. Charcoalgolf.com. Instagram is Charcoal Golf, and those are kind of our 2 platforms. That's really where we're focusing all of our attention. But yeah, we'd love to talk. We'd love to meet with some courses. I'm open for commissions. I'm open for partnerships. We got a long list right now of clubs to paint and things we're working on. But we're always open to conversations.
Mark, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for coming on. For Mark Rivard, I am Josh Stecker. This has been another episode of Off the Deck.
Appreciate it.